Okay, welcome everyone to the final Project Echo Care of Older Adults and Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities session of 2025. Appreciate you being here and spending your early Friday afternoon with us. Few things, if you're able to, please keep your cameras on. This just lets us have a more engaging conversation, also makes the speakers feel like they're not shouting into the void of the interwebs. So do appreciate you leaving your cameras on if you're able. Also asking that you leave yourself muted, but there will be opportunities to unmute and ask questions, share comments, and be part of the discussion. So please, hopefully you can either unmute or use the comment section if you ever have questions or comments. If you ever have any issues with your sound or video, there are little carrot looking things next to your microphone and camera icons, and that can help you reset your preferences there. Also, sometimes if you leave the meeting and come back, that kind of resets everything. So welcome. We appreciate you being here. Appreciate everyone having their names on their little Hollywood squares. If you need to reset your name, you can basically click on the rename tab and simply redo it there. So, tell you a little bit about the Trager Institute. We are in downtown Louisville with the University of Louisville Trager Institute. Our mission is to help individuals optimally age throughout the lifespan. We do this primarily through workforce development, practice transformation, and community transformation. So, appreciate you being here. And if you ever have any questions about our services or anything, please reach out to any of our staff. I'm going to introduce Ms. Mona Huff, and she'll tell you a little bit about the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are glad that you're with us. And I just wanted to share with you, the Kentucky Coalition is built to help support our communities in partnership with other existing coalitions and organizations. And we try to do that in such a way as helping them train and work with their community members to empower our communities to become healthier. That is really what we are all about, believing that we as a state and as individual communities can become healthier. And we'll talk a little bit more toward the end of this meeting how that may happen, even with what we learned today. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Mona. Our curriculum and our sessions are really shaped around lifestyle medicine concepts and age-friendly healthcare concepts. We really try to bring together curriculum that engages our communities around concepts to help all of us flourish, but really being driven by those lifestyle medicine principles and age-friendly healthcare concepts, which we kind of weave throughout our sessions. So again, do appreciate you being here. This is our schedule for the upcoming winter schedule, focusing on blue zones and healthy aging today. In January, we'll have a presentation on living celebrations and beyond. February, the power of purpose and social connections and aging well. And then in March, we'll look at suicide in later life, recognizing risk and responding with compassion. So we do hope that you will mark your calendars and join us in the future. So a little bit about Project Echo. It was founded by Dr. Sanjeev Arora in 2003 at the University of New Mexico. He realized that he had learned a new cutting-edge hepatitis treatment. He couldn't possibly treat everybody in the state of New Mexico, and he couldn't possibly travel to teach everyone. So he started using Zoom to deliver short presentations on this new technique and building knowledge and capacity in local communities and not moving patients. So he used case-based learning, really short didactics, and really created a community to learn together. So this is an opportunity to extend community healthcare outcomes, and we're really, really grateful to be part of this movement. Today, you can receive an attendance certificate. You need to complete an evaluation at the end of today's session. If you are a community health worker or a social worker, you must complete the evaluation to receive continuing education. And we are able to give continuing education for today's session for community health workers through our relationship with the Kentucky Office of Community Health Workers, and for social workers through Brescia College University. So we're really, really appreciative of these partnerships and our ability to offer continuing education to community health workers and social workers. You can learn more about Brescia's online opportunities down here through this QR code, and really appreciate their support. So today's didactic is going to be presented by Kristen Neises. Kristen is a family nurse practitioner and a graduate of Spalding University. She is a geriatric academic career awardee at the U of L Trager Institute and faculty at the U of L School of Nursing. Her project as a GACA focuses on age-friendly concepts, lifestyle medicine, and healthcare transformation. Please welcome your friend and mine, Miss Kristen Neises.
Hi, everybody. So good to see you all. Hope you're staying warm. Got quite a bit of snow today. Nice to wake up to. So I am going to be talking today about blue zones. I've really been fascinated by blue zones for several years, and so I'm excited to share some information with you today. So we're going to be talking about what we can learn from the longest living people on Earth. So what they eat, how they live, how they communicate, how their communities really support aging well. And then we'll connect those lessons to dementia prevention and healthy aging and some practical strategies for older adults. And hope by the end of this session, you'll have a clear understanding of what blue zones are, what makes them different, and how we can adapt pieces of their lifestyle and their environment into our clinical and community settings. So what are the blue zones? They are areas in the world where people have been found to be the healthiest and longest living. The original 5 blue zones included Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Ikaria, Greece, and Loma Linda, California. And the blue zones are regions that have been identified by Dan Buettner. He's a National Geographic explorer, and his team of demographers and epidemiologists. So they were set out, they were looking for places where there was a high percentage of people who lived to 90, 100, or even beyond. And not just living long, not living those years, but living them well. So these communities have low rates of chronic disease, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, dementia. And they didn't achieve this just through medical care alone. They found that these outcomes were really natural byproducts of their culture and their environment and their daily habits. So how were these zones identified? The identification process was pretty rigorous. The researchers first started verifying the ages through birth certificates, census documents, and then cross-referencing multiple official sources. But the part that I really appreciate is that they then lived in these communities, often for months at a time, and they really observed how people spent their day. So how did they eat? How did they move? How were they connected? How did they navigate stress? And how were their families and their communities structured? And the key takeaway that they found was that genetics does play a role, but lifestyle and environment really account for the vast majority of their longevity. And so this is what they came away with. And these 9 habits, called the Power 9, are the common threads that they found across every blue zone. And what's fascinating is that these communities didn't agree on these habits. They weren't, following a program. They just evolved naturally out of their traditions and their culture and their environment. So these habits, they shape everything from mobility to stress to diet to social connection. And we're going to explore each one of these and see how they really translate beautifully into healthy aging strategies. So blue zone principle number 1 is to move naturally. So people in blue zones don't go to gyms, they don't do CrossFit or cycling or any other structured exercise routines. Their activity is actually built into their daily life. So they walk to their neighbors' homes, they garden, they cook, they do household chores. In Okinawa, one of the most important forms of natural movement for them comes from gardening. So many Okinawan elders maintain their vegetable gardens into their 90s and 100s. And gardening is, it incorporates squatting and bending, carrying, walking, all of these functional movements that keep our muscles strong, keep our joints mobile. And it also connects them to nature and community. Many have community gardens that they work in or work with their family. And then they get to enjoy those fresh vegetables that they grow. So for older adults, connecting that natural movement is key for maintaining their balance, mobility, preventing falls and injuries, their cardiovascular health, their cognitive or brain health. And this aligns with what we know about geriatric care, that movement really is medicine. And even those small increases in daily movement reduce their mortality and slow functional decline. Principle number 2 is purpose. So in Okinawa, they call this ikigai. In Costa Rica, it's plan de vida. And both translate to, a reason to wake up in the morning, what matters most to them, right? Having a sense of purpose has been shown to lower stress, reduce risk of dementia, improve your sleep, increase longevity. And for older adults, especially those who have a lot of change, role change, I experience changes like retirement and grief, losing people, helping them reconnect to a sense of purpose is so important and valuable. Principle number 3 is downshift. So all Blue Zones communities have daily rituals to manage their stress. That might be prayer, afternoon naps, meeting neighbors for tea. And this matters because chronic stress contributes to inflammation, which is central to nearly every chronic condition. So, encouraging older adults to adopt even short moments of stillness can be incredibly impactful. I love this article. There is a link to it here on this slide, called Exactly How to Nap Like the Longest Living People in the World. So what they found was that those who had took regular midday naps, about 30 minutes, had a 37% lower risk of dying from heart disease. So this was a study in Greece that included over 20,000 people. So naps are good. The next principle is the 80% rule. So in Okinawa, people pause before meals and say harahachi bu. And this is a Confucian-inspired phrase that reminds them to stop eating when they are 80% full. So this approach prevents overeating, helps them maintain a healthy weight over a lifetime, and it contributes to Okinawans having some of the lowest rates of chronic disease despite moderate calorie intake. Now, we are seeing in Okinawa that shift, becoming a little less healthy. And one thing that they've recognized is that it has become Americanized. They used to not have fast food restaurants, and now they're starting to see a lot more of those with more Americans living in the area, and some of those health benefits are becoming less common. So Dan Buettner explains this concept as an American says, I'm full, and an Okinawan says, I'm no longer hungry. So that's a really different mindset that makes a really big difference. And this principle lines up with what we teach in lifestyle medicine, that mindful eating prevents chronic disease and helps us to maintain healthy body weights. This is a little bit more of a difficult concept for even myself to understand. Like, how do you find when you are 80% full? For some people, it's a little bit easier, but that is one of the common principles. The next principle is the plant slant diet. So across all blue zones, the diet is plant forward, meaning they're not strictly vegetarian, but their diet is centered around plants. So um, especially greens, beans, whole grains, vegetables, nuts, and then meat is occasional, and added sugars are also minimal. So these foods help support gut health. They lower inflammation, again, lowering chronic disease, and they help to protect the brain. Some studies show that people who follow a plant slant diet reduce their risk of cognitive decline by up to 30 to 35%. Principle number 6 started out, and it still really is, but kind of starting to shift from wine at 5 to friends at 5. So in many of the blue zones, people enjoy wine socially and moderately, excluding the Loma Linda Adventists. So Sardinians enjoy a glass of Cannonau wine, probably mispronouncing that, but they enjoy that in the late afternoon or the early evening. And it's always with friends and always with food. So these grapes in this wine contain high levels of antioxidants and polyphenols. But the real benefit comes from the ritual, which is slowing down, connecting with others socially, and marking the end of the workday, making that transition. So this is a bit controversial, given that we are finding more information out about alcohol intake. So for clinical audiences, I really want to emphasize that this is not a recommendation for everyone, especially with older adults. We need to consider falls risk, medications, liver function, and then personal history, right? So the key principle here is that the ritual of relaxing, connecting, and sharing food, I think, is what really gives us a benefit. The next principle is belonging. So being part of a faith-based or spiritual community is one of the biggest predictors of longevity in the blue zones. It provides, again, social support, helps to reduce loneliness and isolation, helps with emotional resilience, provides a sense of belonging. And for older adults, isolation is one of the strongest risk factors for cognitive decline and mortality. So blue zones offer they offer a model of really deeply integrated community belonging. And then in Loma Linda, this is a community in California, high population of Seventh Day Adventists. And they benefit greatly from strong faith communities. They gather weekly for worship, potlucks, volunteer service, and their community also emphasizes rest on the Sabbath, which lowers stress and really fosters social support and healthy habits. And Adventists live 7 to 10 years longer than the average American, in part because of this sense of belonging. The next principle is loved ones first. So families in blue zones traditionally care for their older adults at home. Elders are respected, they're included, they're valued, and this doesn't mean that clinical care isn't needed for them, but it really shows how powerful it is when older adults feel connected and it's still central to family life. And then in Sardinia, the elders often live with or very close to their adult children. Families routinely check in, they share meals, they provide support. And then aging parents are respected and integrated into daily life. This intergenerational model really protects older adults from the loneliness, depression, and functional decline. And it also contributes to the region's unusually high number of centenarians, those who live to be over 100. And these are male centenarians, had the highest number of male centenarians as well. The next principle is the right tribe. And this means that these people in the blue zones have a supportive social circle that reinforces healthy behaviors. So some of the examples in blue zones include walking groups, social clubs, intergenerational groups, faith communities. And for older adults, this can be as simple as connecting them to a group that meets regularly and supports healthy aging or movement. In Okinawa, they have groups called moais, and this is a group that forms when usually they are children or teens, and they are assigned a group of lifelong friends. And this group meets regularly. They help support each other in a variety of different ways. Here you can see a couple of moais meeting together, and many go into their 90s and 100s, continuing to be in these moais. So just one example of how we could integrate this into the care of our older adults is to help them join a walking moai. And this is really just a group who gets together and they walk, but they also connect with each other and share conversation. So there's a link here on how you can do that. Okay, so all of these blue zones principles, they kind of map what we know about dementia prevention really already. That movement improves vascular health, cognitive health, plant forward diets reduce inflammation, stress reduction protects the brain, connection, purpose, preserve function. And we often say that the disease, the dementia, begins decades before symptoms. And blue zone habits, just like lifestyle medicine principles, really help to mitigate many of these early drivers that can lead to dementia. And quickly want to talk about some of the new community transformations. In the U.S., there are initiatives with where Blue Zones have partnered with cities to transform their built environment, so improving walkability, food access, social participation, workplace well-being, and these projects have been launched in several different cities listed here, and also entire states like Iowa are starting to adopt these models. Um, and just as an example, there's more information linked here about these communities where you can see some of the results. But just wanted to share in one, Fort Worth, between 2014 and 2018 when they were doing the Blue Zones project. They helped to reduce smoking by 31%. Helped to reduce cholesterol by 11% and a 7% drop in high blood pressure, and also boosting exercise by 17%. And now also the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has partnered with Blue Zones and trying to help educate healthcare workers on Blue Zones principles and forming a Blue Zones health that focuses on really preventative lifestyle approaches across communities. So these Blue Zones projects showed improvements in a lot of different outcomes: lower BMI, smoking rates, higher physical activity, better social engagement among older adults, lower healthcare costs. And in Albert Lee, which was, I believe, the first community finished the project, life expectancy rose by 3.1 years within the first few years of implementation. Older adults specifically benefit from improved walkability, more benches, more rest areas, purpose workshops, and social walking groups that help to decrease loneliness. These projects change what's around us, so not just what the individuals do. So they helped install sidewalks and crosswalks, created community gardens. They partnered with grocery stores to highlight those whole nutritious foods. They helped to develop those MOI walking groups. They expanded senior care programming. And all of this is so crucial for our care of older adults because we found that environment shapes the behavior more consistently than motivation and individual behaviors. Having those environment changes really help to support those changes. So here's how we can translate these concepts into our everyday care. We can encourage movement snacks, not stacks. This is just small bouts of movement throughout the day. Chair yoga, walking groups. For nutrition, we can start with one plant-based meal a day, share a recipe. For stress, we can teach 1 to 2 minute breath practices or gratitude routines. For social connection, we can help people get connected with a church or a senior center or a community group. And then for purpose, we can help older adults identify what brings them meaning and purpose, whether it's caregiving, volunteering, creative pursuits. So just a few small ideas, and even just one of these changes can really help help an older adult. These strategies, like I've already mentioned, they really align with dementia prevention frameworks in the 4M's. So encouraging daily movement, social engagement, stress management, nutrition helps to preserve their cognition and their independence. And here's just just wanted to highlight some of the Trager offerings that we have for social connection and movement. We have wonderful Tai Chi classes here at Social Club as well. And then what can we do as a community? We can start to adopt a population health view. We can advocate for those walkable sidewalks, the age-friendly benches, farmers markets, community gardens, cooking demos. You can see here the link for the Louisville plan for walkability. You can host a purpose workshop where people are guided through a session that helps them identify their values and strengths and meaningful roles in life, so they can really articulate a personal reason to wake up in the morning. And then an age-friendly micro environment is just a small intentional design space that really helps to support older adults' safety and mobility, comfort. And then these changes then ripple outward and really help to create healthier environments for older adults. So I'll wrap up here just with a few key takeaways. That Blue Zones, they teach us that longevity is not accidental. It is shaped by small habits, supportive social circles, and healthy environments. And we have tremendous opportunities to really integrate these strategies into older adult care. All right, thank you all so much. I don't know, Justin, if we have any time.
So it is 12:30. Do you have time for a few questions?
Maybe a minute. I have to hop over to another obligation.
Okay, so any questions for Kristen? And if we don't get to your question, we can always connect you with her through email. So any questions for Kristen? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
It's always good to see you, and we will see you in the new year. I hope you have a happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
All right, so Dr. Sam Cotton is going to present so this is a composite case. We didn't have a, a, a real live case today, so we created a case based on people that we have worked with in the past, and I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Sam Cotton.
Hey, thank you, Justin, for that introduction. Yeah, so today I'm going to be presenting a case that's really focused on um, some of these principles that maybe we could apply with this particular patient that go in alignment with what Kristen was talking about related to Blue Zone. So our case of Miss Torres focuses on healthy aging, cognitive health, and I think will allow us to sort of explore some lifestyle medicine-based interventions. As Justin said, this is a case that we've sort of pulled together that uses some of the experiences of our real patients that we've worked with in the past, but Miss Torres is not real, so I will be saying her name throughout since she is fictionalized. So our case today focuses on Miss Alana Torres. She's a 78-year-old woman who's experiencing some early signs of cognitive changes along with some functional and social challenges. I'm really hoping we can use this discussion to sort of explore very practical, low burden strategies that can help promote independence, purpose, well-being. Some of you might be working with patients who are similar to Ms. Torres, or maybe you're a caregiver of someone who's having some of these challenges as well. And in thinking about pulling this case together, I think that Ms. Torres and her experience or the situation that she's in right now is very common and illustrates some of the very common challenges that we see in aging adults that are dealing with a multitude of things. So she is someone who is technically medically stable, but we gradually see her disengaging from some of these areas that Kristen talked about earlier, things like movement, nutrition, social connection. Now, technically, she's not in crisis right now, but she's clearly sort of at this crossroads, and what are some of these things that we can do to help intervene early, using some of these ideas of blue zones, lifestyle medicine, community-based approaches before her functional and cognitive decline really accelerates. Um, so you can go to the next slide. So Miss Torres is a 78-year-old widowed woman. She has hypertension, hyperlipidemia, osteoarthritis, and she was recently diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, as you can see on the slide, diagnosed around 8 months ago. She's living in a semi-rural community, which is very common for a lot of us. And what I mean by that is, she's living in a rural area, but she's very close to an urban area where she could access some services, but struggles to understand, what she can tap into. And we'll talk about that here in some subsequent slides. She's experiencing low mood, limited mobility, increasing social isolation. In terms of nutrition, really consists of convenience and processed foods. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, and spends most of her day not really engaging in movement, very sedentary lifestyle. She expresses this fear of slowing down and losing her independence as well. And as you can see here from a medical standpoint on this slide, some of her conditions are very common for her age. They, based on some of the clinical measures, are relatively well managed. Some elevation on some of her levels, like, for example, blood pressure and LDL, for example. But I think the key takeaway here is that some of these challenges that she's dealing with really contribute to things like pain, fatigue, reduced confidence with her movement. Her osteoarthritis really does limit her activity, her movement, and that mild cognitive impairment really raises some concerns for long-term independence, especially if she continues to have decline in that area, and she does live alone. And then something else that I do think that is really, really important for us to sort of keep in mind here is that this is a person who um, is dealing with some grief-related challenges as well. Since her husband passed away 4 years ago, she's living alone, feeling that social isolation as well. So really thinking about some of those issues that she might be dealing with in terms of connecting with others. And as Kristen talked about too, with the Blue Zones, really thinking about that community approach to some of the needs that she might have. So, in terms of looking at some of the biological or background information for Miss Torres, I want to highlight a couple of things here. So, her daily routine has really become very sedentary over the last few years. She experiences some joint pain, some limited transportation as well, that I think plays a part into that. And she also, as it relates to movement in particular, has this fear of falling. And so that has really reduced her activity levels as well. Now, cognitively, I mentioned earlier she does have that mild cognitive impairment, but she does remain insight oriented. And what I mean by that is that she's aware of some of these changes. She knows that she's forgetting things that she used to just be able to do independently. So that has sort of elevated her anxiety about some of these changes that she's dealing with as well. Um, and then again, related to the nutrition piece, high intake of convenience processed foods. And I think this is important when we talk about Miss Torres because this is something that's new that she's experiencing related to nutrition. Previously, she had really engaged in her community as it relates to some of these areas and um, really enjoyed cooking as well. So thinking about how can we help her reconnect to that as well. In terms of some of the social determinants of health areas, in particular, I want to highlight a couple of things. Advanced directive, nothing currently in place, but she does have this extreme anxiety or fear of ending up in a nursing home. She really does want to continue to live in her own home. She values that, sense of independence that she has of being in a comfortable space, right? And, knowing her, environment is sort of important. And so she doesn't have a designated power of attorney. She hasn't really talked to her children about this as well, had any formal planning. Some of her social needs, I think, are also highly impacted by the fact that transportation is an issue. As I mentioned earlier, she's sort of in a semi-rural area, meaning not necessarily a lot of walkability. She does have close access to an urban center where she could receive some support in various areas that are her needs, but she has to drive to do that. Currently, she does have a discomfort with driving at night. And doesn't like driving on highways. It's just too hectic for her to be able to, manage all of that. So she only drives during the daytime and avoids highways. Um, because of this, I think in terms of her social life and being able to engage in that way, she does have some challenges as well. And then in terms of thinking about the economic stability piece, she does have some budget constraints. That often impacts her food choices and also impacts, just her meal planning in general. She's going for what's convenient and what's affordable for her a lot of the time. Then when we talk about psychosocial determinants of health, I think it's important, again, going back to that grief that she's experiencing that due to her husband's death 4 years ago, that feeling of, not having that connection, not having someone daily to engage with in a meaningful way, has really contributed to a lot of loneliness for her. She does primarily spend a lot of time watching television, doesn't really have a lot of hobbies that she has engaging with at the moment. And again, that I think all of that has really impacted her overall mental well-being, and really how she's, able to sort of cope with some of these things she's dealing with. She doesn't really have anybody to talk to. Um, she does have a very strong Hispanic and Catholic identity, does value community, values cooking, values caregiving. I mentioned earlier the piece surrounding nutrition, and mentioned that she's, going for convenience related foods, not really doing a lot of cooking. But this is something that was really important to her. She was a, school cafeteria cook for 30 something years. So she, that was something that was really connected to her, and also within her culture was really valued. And so she really struggles, I think, in this space, because that was something that was just so part of who she was, both from a personal standpoint within her culture, but also professionally as well when she worked. And then again, just to highlight a few things here, she is widowed, lives alone. Um, Two adult children. One does live out of state. One is local, but they have a lot going on in their own personal life. And so it doesn't seem, based in conversations with her, that they're having a lot of interactions as well. So she sort of has this fear of burdening her children, and really having these open and honest conversations with them about some of these things she's struggling with. As it relates to individual health behaviors, she's never smoked, doesn't use alcohol or illicit drugs. But some of the concerning things here are the, very limited movement or physical activity. She does report joint pain when she does engage in minimal walking, and has no current, structured exercise routine at this moment. Um, Again, just to highlight convenience and processed food, low intake of fruits, vegetables, um, frequently eats alone. So that, something that used to be just part of community and fellowship for her is no longer sort of present in her life. So she's eating alone quite a bit. She does report that she tends to overeat when she's very lonely or very stressed, or dealing with some of the anxiety that she's having, especially related to this mild cognitive impairment diagnosis that she received. And then last but not least, and I think it's a really important point, as it relates to medication adherence, she occasionally does forget doses of medications because she forgets to take them. It doesn't really have a good structure to her, day-to-day routine. In general, she does have access to regular sources of care. She has a primary care provider, but sometimes she doesn't feel safe or comfortable driving to those appointments, depending on what time of day they are. So sometimes she doesn't have consistent follow-up. She does have access to medications, as I mentioned earlier, but and her medications are affordable because of her insurance. But again, adherence is inconsistent due to some of those memory-related challenges that she's dealing with. She has not been connected to counseling or behavioral health support. Doesn't seem to be necessarily aware of some of the services that she could tap into. And she does feel that the providers that she has engaged with in her healthcare system are kind, but they often seem overwhelmed to her, right? So she really doesn't feel like she's had the space or time to really talk to them about some of these memory concerns that she feels like are getting worse. Some of this grief that she is dealing with still, and some of these maybe lifestyle medicine approaches as well. And then access to dental care, not been consistent. She's not seen a dentist in over 2 years, partly due to cost, but also some of those transportation barriers that I mentioned earlier. And then in terms of environmental determinants of health, I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's really important for her is being able to live in her own home for as long as possible. But there are some challenges present in her environment. So, for example, cluttered hallways. She does have a lot of chairs that don't necessarily have armrest. So she has difficulty rising from low furniture, which can contribute to falls risk, as we know. Um, she is able to keep up with basic home housekeeping, but sometimes the pain and fatigue that she's dealing with really limit to her ability to complete all the things that she needs to do around the house. And then I think in terms of stressful environment, I want to highlight that as well. Really experiences some loneliness, grief, which makes the environment sort of stressful for her sometimes as well. Despite some of these challenges that we've talked about, um, Miss Suarez really does have several strengths. She's very motivated to remain independent. She expresses deep insight, which I think is important, into her situation, understands some of the things that are going on in her own life, and really expresses this feeling of wanting to feel like herself again, which I think is important. Again, she's medically stable, still capable of making changes, and has that insight to say, I want to make some changes. Really thinking about this from a strengths-based approach, I think is really important. Here's a list of her medications. I mentioned earlier, very medically stable, on a few medications here. And I think that, again, part of the issue is the adherence piece, her forgetting to take the medications as directed as well. So going back to the original request, I think it's really important for us to sort of talk about this in context of the blue zones. And what I'm hoping to take away from today's discussion is really sort of this concrete, realistic plan for Ms. Torres that align with some of these blue zone principles, and focus on interventions that don't overwhelm her. Because again, I think that, when we talk about this particular person, because it is fictionalized, there might be ways in which we could approach somebody like her that really could help us think about patients we're working with, or again, even if we're caregivers, people we're taking care of, to really reconnect with that purpose in their life, movement, social engagement in ways that feel very achievable and sustainable.
All right, thank you, Sam. So, as we're thinking about the blue zones and we're thinking about this type of case, I mean, I personally know at least three people that would fit this, right off the top of my head. And, unfortunately, it's people that are very close to me or very close to people that are close to me. And so we have this conversation of like, how do we get people to turn off the TV and go out and be in the world? And so I think this is a really rich opportunity to think about, I think a little bit of professional intervention, but then also social intervention, or engagement. So thoughts?
Well, Justin, as you know, I have some of that integrated into what we'll be doing through the KCHC. But I think the most important thing that we can do for an individual like that who is obviously feeling downhearted is to try to find out what their passion is and help them see their purpose, and then help them with steps in order to do that. And of course, one of the things that I think is a gentle way to getting folks into this time frame is to become a part of our Flourishing Together, which is a 8-week commitment for a couple hours each week. And I think that it will get their minds open and help them to start thinking about the process.
And Sam, I don't know if you see in the chat, like a grief group could be a good opportunity.
Yeah. And I think, we included grief in this particular case because we see that a lot. And it's not just always grief that is related to the death of a spouse. or a significant loved one. Sometimes grief is a lot more complex than that, and sometimes it's the grief of sort of grappling with what you've lost already. And I think that's an important consideration because, she's sort of at this juncture, and again, that piece is sort of based on patients that we've all worked with. Um, she's sort of retreating because she doesn't know how to process in this situation her husband's death, but it's comfortable. It's more comfortable to sit in front of the TV instead of trying to go and put yourself out there and engage. Um, so sometimes it's very complex, but I love that idea, Brenda. Thank you for, I always think, sometimes I think we ignore the impact of grief. And a lot of times we're often told, oh, well, that happened 4 years ago. Well, that's not grief. Grief doesn't follow a timeline, right? So
Mhm.
important consideration.
And sometimes, it's hard to get out in that world by yourself. And so
Mhm.
you need someone that can encourage you and do things with you.
And Preeti questions, how do you provide the initial motivation to participate, maybe one-on-one situations initially? I mean,
Mhm.
I think a virtual friendly visitor could be, a
Mhm.
good way to introduce this. And I don't know, are virtual friendly visitors trained to, suggest other opportunities?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so, and for those of you who are not familiar, what Justin's referring to is our program that is um, awesome for individuals who are interested in this. And we have individuals who volunteer who, do what the name says. They do friendly visits virtually with a person. And it can look whatever the patient or person participant wants it to look like. So they might call them weekly or every other week, or, the sort of timeline for that is really contingent on the person and what they want. But they really do help guide the individual. It's very free flowing, so it's kind of directed based on what that person wants to talk about. But sometimes things like this come up, right? And so the friendly visitor will, sort of say, "Hey, have you heard about this program, or have you heard about that piece of, services that we offer?" Or they might even know about something else that's going on in the community that they'll share.
Sam, one thing that I always think about is how do you like, I mean, I think there's like several layers to this, but how would you find, for this client, things in her community that she could engage in that are ways that she can, participate and feel welcomed and accommodate some of her specific, transportation needs, things like that.
Yeah, sometimes I think, and I'm sure Mona can speak to this as well, maybe others on the call. Sometimes it's about throwing like the spaghetti up against the wall and seeing what sticks. Especially with somebody who, because I have some people who can just tell that I've worked with in the past who can just immediately recognize I used to do X and I really enjoyed it. I'd like to get re-engaged in that particular activity. Some people don't necessarily know, right? Depending on what their life circumstance was, they, worked, they took care of their children, they took care of their family, and they didn't have the space to sort of explore those things. So it's very common for someone not to be able to identify something right off the bat. And it does sound overwhelming, right? When you just ask the question that way. So sometimes it's about making those sort of um, subtle suggestions to the person and seeing what spark is lit, for that person to get them connected. And it really does involve, I think, for those of you who are practitioners on the call, um, building that rapport with the person that you're working with and building that trust as well, I think is really important.
Would it be possible for her to have a community connector assigned to her, do home visits, and ask those open-ended questions to find out what it is she likes or what kind of goals she would, pardon me, like to set for herself to kind of get into it and see if she can connect her to community events?
That would be great. And I think with this person, the motivation is there. So she would probably say yes to that. I have had patients who I've worked with who, you offer them those types of opportunities to have a navigator or a connector or a community health worker or whoever it is, um, whatever the title is, to work with them, and they say no. And partly it's because it's scary to think, that's making change in their life sometimes, depending on what it is you're talking about. And in those situations, if you find yourself in that where you're like, this person would be great for this, and they're immediately like, nope, I'm not interested. Building that motivation, planting that seed, and letting it grow over time, I think is important. So some things like this aren't going to be solved. Um, Immediately because that person's motivation isn't there. Again, she's different. Miss Torres is different in that she's like, I want something, I'm ready to make these changes.
What about her food, Sam,
Hmm.
and her diet? I mean, is this something that is going to be, where there, the community-based food support isn't going to be a
Yeah.
quick fix, but are there opportunities in rural areas for that?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't think we should assume just because it's a rural area, there might not be community support for that. Some of our rural areas have community gardens, and I think this is a person who might be a really good candidate for participating in something like that. Um, and, I also think that goes back to even if you're not a person who's here today who's working with someone where you might have these similar challenges and or maybe you're a caregiver and your loved one doesn't have these challenges. I think just as all of us are members of a community, we should think about, what are some things we can help organize in our community in this space. Because I do think she's the type of person who would be, and again, a lot of patients are like this, they would benefit not, sometimes it's not just the nutrition piece, but it's the nutrition coupled with the social aspect to it that I think is so critical. Um, she's eating most of her meals alone. There's no engagement with anyone. The convenience piece is partly because it's easier for her, but I think there's some other things that could tap into again because she was a cook. She was a school cafeteria cook for so long. She enjoyed cooking. How do we tap into that? And what looking around and seeing what's available in her area. And she's the person, who's a prime candidate for these types of suggestions because she wants to make those changes and already knows about nutrition to a certain extent. Like she knows what she's supposed to be doing. She's just not doing it at the moment.
Sam, do you see Missy's question in the chat?
Age groups are age friendly for each age group. Don't know how to get started. I guess sometimes people are into. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's something. Um, I agree with you. Like, we talk about this when we talk about support groups or grief focus groups a lot of times because um, you don't want to go to a support group or a group at all if the people who are part of that group don't really, especially from an age standpoint, look like you, right? So, a 78-year-old's not going to want to go to some group that was sort of designed for 20 somethings, right? It's not going to work. There's not a lot of commonalities there sometimes. Depending on the topic, I know intergenerational things when we talk about that, but that's a little bit different in what we're talking about today. And so I think that, anytime we are thinking about designing stuff, we need to think about that and think about how we can make that work. It's not always feasible depending on what service is there and how the organization has structured that service. But I think that there's a really great opportunity for us to be mindful in our design of these types of programs. And I love Brenda's suggestion about volunteering, maybe at a school cafeteria or even, a church, when they do I don't want to say potlucks, but when the church afterwards have various services where they have community, they have fellowship after the actual service, maybe volunteering at something like that too.
So I think some of this conversation can transfer over into the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities as we start to talk about ways that we can take this into our communities. So um, thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me.
So um, I just want to say that basically all the session material today, the PowerPoint and a recording of the session will be available on iEcho. This is just an example of when you log in, and this is last month. When you click on last month's session, you'll see over here on the right-hand side, there's a link to the recording and a link to the material. So I'll do something similar for this month, and I'm trying to be consistent in my naming conventions, and sometimes I just forget a little bit. But when you log into your accounts and you go to the schedule, you'll be able to access session contents. And you can do that for any session. So if you ever miss a session, as long as you maintain your iEcho account and get access to it, you'll be able to access recording and session material. So I think that's a really nice feature in the new system. And I hope it's working okay for everybody. What's that?
I'm sorry. I was talking to myself, forgot I was on audio.
Okay. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Mona, so you can stay unmuted, Mona.
Okay. Well, again, we welcome you, and I just want to talk to you a moment about the purpose of KCHC, and that is to train and empower the stakeholders and community members to provide hope and education for their communities. And we'll talk a little bit about that, how we can do that as we proceed. So let's go on. So today we want, in our time of sharing, to think about some of the things that we have learned. And probably the most important part is how we share this information. I know often we go to meetings and we say, oh my goodness, that was a good meeting. And we put our notes in our file and that's the end of it. Well, if we do that, then we've really failed. So let's make our time valuable with what we've learned today. And let's talk about some of the ways that we could share this information to our communities. So you can either unmute or you can put it in chat and Justin will share it with us.
So there were a couple of comments in the chat as we were wrapping up the last discussion. Alyssa mentioned the local extension office has homemakers programs where they can cook and do crafts. And there's other ways that you can find small purpose and that values and stimulates cognition without stress. So I think that these are great suggestions of things that we learned today. But yeah, like how do people imagine using this in their lives or in their communities or the people you work with?
Think about someone that maybe is not a client, but someone that you love. How can you approach them and how can you start helping them understand that there are some things that we can do to help us be healthier, even if we are in our 60s or 70s. Sometimes they think, oh, well, it's too late, but it's never too late to enjoy life.
So Stacy commented she thinks that the local libraries are often overlooked as valuable resources for older adults. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Yes, good point. Yes.
Brenda wants to share about the blue zones with her coworkers. Something that we're working on here at the Trager Institute with one of our area ministries is a village model. And I'm imagining, taking information about the blue zones and some of these types of groups to the village and trying to do that in small communities around Louisville.
Right. And some of you have children or grandchildren, And so if we can start helping them see how we can respect elders and help them by maybe visiting some of the elders in our community and taking them a small tomato plant just to start a porch little garden. And then maybe they will want to do more as time goes on. So there's lots of little ways that we can help even those that are close to us. Any other thoughts? Someone said they wanted to share this with their coworkers. So how are you going to do that?
During a meeting, I'd like to just present the concept of blue zones to them and just start a discussion. Something we don't always put into practice is when we're looking at that and how, like, social determinants of health and otherwise, and say, hey, we can use this to help our members get what they need or want, or at least offer.
Right. Yes. I think workplace education is really important because health is contagious. And if we start within our work areas and then take it home to our families and then further out into the community, it's going to grow. Now, the thing of it is, I think that as we're starting this and talking to folks, that sometimes we have to do it gently and slowly. Because all of a sudden to hear, if you are a meat and potato person, that we think it's wise to eat 80% plant food, they're going to push back and say, well, that's not for me. I'm not like that. So even starting out, and this is how I started out in the early 2000s, is Meatless Monday, something that simple. And then we just kept doing a little more and a little more. Okay, so also there's different programs that we can share with you that can help folks start understanding it. And let's go on to the next slide, Justin, as we start thinking about some ways that we can share with folks.
Okay, yeah, and I just wanted to comment or acknowledge a few comments in the chat about, and Bree, I had the same thought, how would my mother receive this information, and looking for ways to engage her. Sarah's talking about sharing this with her students. Pretty is, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, talking about, inviting older adults to participate in the walk in their neighborhood.
Yes.
And I love this comment about feeling like making the communities we serve part of these discussions. These are all really, really great conversations. So thank you.
Oh, yes. Very good points. And together is how we can do this. So let's keep going. Okay, so I want to give you a few moments to share any events that you may be having coming up that you would like us to know about, or if you have any concerns in your community that you would like to share and see if we can work together on how to look at these concerns. So I'll be quiet for a moment and give you a chance to either unmute or put in the chat.
I'll just say that an event that we're going to be looking at starting, and I talked briefly about the village model, but we're going to be starting a village here in Jefferson County starting in 2026 through Highland Community Ministries. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, they're more than welcome to reach out to me, and we'll be doing presentations to talk about getting people that would be potential members. So we'd be doing presentations to recruit membership and let people know about the benefits of it, but then also connecting volunteers with people that want to work in that village model to provide volunteering in the community. So there's going to be some opportunities for both people to be recipients of care and receiving benefits, but also people giving back and being participants in that. So I'll be sharing some more about that in 2026.
Okay, thank you, Justin. And just be thinking about who do you know that would like to be a part of that. I'm thinking about the health organizations through our schools, the different clubs that give service hours, things like that. And that's a good way to bring in some generational folks too, as we learn to respect our elders. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the programming that we have that I think is gentle steps toward looking at becoming more like the blue zones. And so on every Monday night, with the exception of holidays and breaks, those kind of things, we have a Zoom meeting. It's called My Health Matters, and so does yours. And this is simply a meeting for us to come together and learn and to support each other. We've been doing this ever since COVID. I had actually done it as a once a month program prior to this in person. And then when we started doing it this way, our folks said, no, don't go back to the in-person. This is so convenient for everybody. So as you can see, we are finished for the month of December, but in January, we will be doing New Year, New Hope. I will be talking to that, and that's one of the things we're going to do. We're going to just talk about what are our passions? What do we want to see happen to us in 2026? And we know that we can't just wish upon a star, but that we have to put steps to it. And then we do an open conversation ever so often. And it's been a while since we did one. And it lets our people who want to be a part of this, and it is an open meeting. You can pick and choose. You don't have to come to all of them. And we just let people talk about things that may be bothering them, or maybe things they're grateful for. Sometimes we'll talk about things that we talked about the week before, but we just pretty much let it be what the folks that are attending want to talk about. The next week, of course, is the Martin Luther King holiday, so we will not be meeting. And then the next Thursday, we're going to be doing a presentation on the sleep-brain connection and how rest supports healthy aging. And sleep is something that's so overlooked, how important it is to holistic health. So I'm really thankful that we can share this with you. So let's go on to the next slide. Also, I would say about the previous slide, if any of you would ever want to speak or know of a good speaker or topic, please feel free to contact me. Got a cold, so I'm having a little problems here. In January, we will be starting 2 more diabetes self-management classes. And we're wanting to help people look at the new year as a way to become a new you. The diabetes self-management classes is a 6-week science-based program to self-manage diabetes and pre-diabetes diagnosis. Justin, I'm going to ask you to take over just for a moment.
Okay. And so these classes start on Tuesday, January 13th in the afternoon from 1 to 3:30, and Thursday, January 15th from 6 to 8:30. And so these are 6 weeks classes. You can always reach out to us through email, or you can use the QR code here to sign up. Mona, are you good, or do you want me to talk?
Our Flourishing Together class, you've heard me mention it a time or two already. And we're going to be starting those in February. We're offering an afternoon and an evening. And this is just a very informal way for people to come together and learn about easy and practical ways to eat healthier, become more active, and learn how to manage, and the important word, prevent chronic diseases in a safe and encouraging social environment. We believe that health is contagious, and we believe that teamwork works. And so we invite you to come with your own team members if you want, or if not, then we will make teams within the class. We have a lot of fun. My theory is if you don't have fun with a meeting, then it's a wasted meeting. So I want us to learn, but I want us to enjoy it too. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here are some other programs that we offer, and every one of them are programs that would help us as we are slowly moving to learning more about the Blue Zone's activities. Our first program was our very first program that when we came together, it was our mission is that we could help adults with multiple chronic conditions to prove life satisfaction through a comprehensive care navigation program. And how we do that is that we have our practical students that are working along those who have complex issues and need that extra help. And then they are able to do valuable assessments that helps us know exactly what that patient or client needs. Our caregiver program, which you've heard a little bit about, is designed for caregivers of aging adults and 60 and above, and they help them so much with support. There's lots of different support groups and educational events they can attend, and then also helps them get the resources they need. If you or someone that you know would be interested in that program, you can fill out this interest survey and someone will get back with you within a few days. Now, that may not be true right now with the holidays coming up, but if you're having a real issue and need to talk to somebody right away, I would call the Trager Institute this afternoon. Our virtual friendly visitor program, you've heard a little bit about that. And again, we are training these folks so that when they do an assessment, they can dig deeper and find out what are some of the needs. If it's just simply they're feeling some isolation and some loneliness and perhaps just some mild depression, they will work with them very closely. But if they need further help, they have ways to refer them to someone else in our Trager Institute. And the Pearls program. Now, this program is really a beautiful program, which would probably work for this woman that we talked about before. And it's a program that helps them to rediscover their joy, their purpose, and a connection with our program to encourage active, rewarding lives, thus Pearls, at a no-cost counseling program with telehealth for adults 60 and over. I do know that they have been able to do a few if they wanted to come in, but for the most part, we try to keep it telehealth. Okay, so let's go on to the next session. This is becoming an optional aging scholar. Do you know a little bit more about this than I may?
Yeah, so the Optimal Aging Scholar program is it's basically a program that we're offering to learn a deeper dive into caring for older adults. Attending Project Echoes is one of the requirements, but we have a series of online modules, attendance at an interprofessional case management experience, and our Impact 4M training, which takes a deeper dive into age-friendly healthcare concepts. So if you're interested in this, and then we have participation in our conference in the spring. So you can always email me and I can connect you to Sophia if you're interested in learning more. So I hope you'll consider being an Optimal Aging Scholar. And then do you want me to talk about the Flourish Care Centers of Excellence? So we have been working with 3 area development districts, KIPTA, Barren River, and the Cumberland Valley area, to really take age-friendly concepts into these areas and work with community-based organizations to create steering committees that work to support caring for older adults. Chandler House is currently the coordinator for the Cumberland Valley area, and we have 2 new people coming in January that'll work in the KIPTA area and the Barren River Area Development District. So really excited to welcome them aboard as we, really try to get this age-friendly work out into communities and work with community organizations to improve caring for older adults.
Okay, so one of the things about the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities, what we are here for is for us to become healthier, all of us. And so our pledge is that we'll become an effective state coalition working with community members and community-based organizations to empower our state to become a healthier and compassionate people. And therefore, in order for that to happen, and sometimes when people ask, how can we start this with someone else? I say by modeling it. And this is part of our pledge. We will practice self-care and model healthy behaviors to our families, our co-workers, and members of our communities. We can't cram good health down anyone's throat. But a lot of times as we live it, perhaps not even talking about it much, but then they start seeing a change in us. There's a glow when you get feeling better. Obviously, you're going to have more energy. You're going to be taking a walk instead of sitting there watching TV. And when they see your changes, sometimes they will ask about it and want to be a part of it. I liked particularly when we were talking about how we could take this into our community, that someone suggested starting small walking clubs. And I would really like to encourage that. Even if it's a few people in your neighborhood and you live in a neighborhood that's safe for you to walk, you may start by yourself, but then maybe other people will join you. Sometimes you might want to, if you've got close friends and you want to do a yoga class together, or you want to just turn on the video and find a free one on your computer and do it together. So let's think about how we can be the model and part of the change, not only to see ourselves become healthier, but those that we love and those that are surrounding us. One of the first things I learned when I moved to Kentucky, that we were at the bottom of the pile in so many of the health outcomes. And I just don't think that that's what we really want. And I think that we can do better. And so I'm encouraging myself as well as each of you to live healthier, smart lives with great quality. And as we say, flourish as we age. Let's look at aging as an opportunity, not a disease. So with that, I will say, have a great holiday season. Come back refreshed. I would love to see every one of you on Monday night, that first Monday night in January, and we're going to talk about how we're going to change. And then I'm turning it over to Justin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona. Hope to see everybody in the new year. We'll be back on January 16th. So if you have an iEcho account, which everybody here should, you can just log in like you did on January 16th. I hope that iEcho is working well for you and you're getting the reminder emails and it's easy to log in. I know that have been a couple glitches, but I think that the Project Echo people have worked that out. So today, here is the session evaluation. I'm going to put this in the chat really quick. Give me just a second. Sorry. But if you are a community health worker or a social worker, you must complete this survey in order to receive continuing education. But I'm going to put this in the chat as well, so you can click the link and please go ahead and complete that evaluation. And if I don't talk to you, I hope you have a happy holiday season and a good new year.